Now, the African Union has officially adopted Swahili as an official working language. The approval comes following a request by Tanzanian Vice President Philip Mpango, who argued that over 100 million people in Africa speak Swahili, making it one of the most widely spoken languages in the African continent. The AU comprises of 55 member states. Now, joining us to discuss the significance of the move is Africa analyst, Advocate Sipho Mantula. Advocate, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. Just how far-reaching is the decision like the one made by the African Union?
Also, Jumbo Africa, to the viewers of Newsroom, to look back at the significance on both fronts, that is almost 16 years. You will recall that the African Union in 2006 already adopted, so I'm a bit skeptical with the word of working language when actually it should be looking at, yes, it's a language of oral communication, but now it has to be implemented even on the text. Because having been to the AU, I'm aware that English, French, and Arabic have been contesting. But let's look back at significance of this. It was as early as 2019 when the then president of Tanzania pushed SADC as well to adopt Kiswahili. South African government basic education since 2020 has pushed that even if we have foreign languages like German, French, Mandarin, it's important that we need to have Kiswahili language. And the media as well, Ntokozo, is not doing good, both on radio and TV, of promoting this language of unity and as well as language of trade. Because one aspect that we need to understand, when Africa was colonized, it was colonized through language, it was colonized through culture, it was colonized through politics.
Absolutely. And when one thinks about the history and trajectory of Swahili, Advocate, thinking about how when we look at the migration sort of patterns on the African continent, the way trade was introduced, Swahili was very key to that. And so it only makes sense that the language be adopted in this manner to bolster communication in diplomatic and trade relations. But why has it taken so long for the AU to adopt it as a working language?
You know, one will not blame AU because member states form part of the AU, the regional bodies, but I can assure you that in the regional bodies like your East Africa community, or Burundi, Kenya, you look at the Southern Sudan, Rwanda, they've been using it even in their parliaments. Our problem in most of the SADC countries, your Arab states, your West Africa, is that we have been held ransom by the colonial languages, even in parliaments. If you look, the Pan-African Parliament here at home, are they using Swahili as the language of even communication and in their text? No, they are still using French and English and Arabic, meaning we are still being colonized by the language of the colonizer to a point where there is no political will, there is no cultural consciousness, because in some instances, we don't talk of political will in the absence of cultural consciousness and resources being put. Remember that South Africa and Kenya, Tanzania, they looked at how they can assist our basic education. And for me, again, it seems that we have even forgotten the then president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Kabarange Nyerere, in the 1960s, when he brought this language to say, let it be the language of trade, let it go to schools, to the working place, and even in the media space. Hence, earlier I did lament to say our media is still quarantined, is still sanitized with the European knowledge and the European languages. And that's why we are struggling even to reach the needs of our people when we have community challenges or community protests.
Advocate, you know, while Swahili is spoken in over, 14 countries, it doesn't cover the length and the breadth of the continent, which is home to, as you've mentioned, Francophone, English-speaking, Arab-speaking individuals. It's home to over 2,000 diverse languages. So should this mark a concern, the fact that when we look at how widely the language is spoken, it might cover quite a substantive amount of just topographical space, but really we still have a number of other languages that contend with Swahili.
No, correctly. I fully agree with you on that sentiment. Swahili as well, one can say there is a mixture of Arabic, there was a mixture of English and even Latin, but as a colonial language as well, we say it's a Bantu language. Remember that in restoring the Bantu language of Swahili, it is the same applies to us, maybe speaking in Tswana or Xhosa or isiZulu, that we still maintain our identity. It is not the issue of why at the AU and in the regional bodies, and earlier, as I mentioned in the parliament, we are still caught up in the lingua franca of our former colonizers, and we don't insist. I will have said to you, Amharic is one of the critical languages in Ethiopia, looking at its history from writing and from speaking, but they have not imposed it because they've got many languages. You look at West Africa, like you have said, they have many languages, but I think what happened in 2004, there was a time where President Chisano spoke at the AU, and President Obasanjo was moved to say, I need to learn Kiswahili too. So it is a matter of that the regional bodies, the member states of the AU, need to focus on it, because we cannot restore the African cultural consciousness or integrate Africa if we will be using our former colonial masters' language, because that's where we are caught up in understanding the critical importance of language, because language is economy as well, and language is education and is cultural consciousness.
Now, beyond the adoption that we've been talking about and the official recognition, what other work still needs to be done to ensure that Africa works towards having a common language? And I say that because not only will it unite us in speech, as you've mentioned, but also in the means by which we move the continent forward. We know that there's a lot of movement around, introducing and establishing proper intra-African trade. We know that our very own president took on a tour of West Africa to encourage that. But we still have languages as a barrier. So what other ways can we, help foster what has sort of already begun at the AU and in other countries, certainly, when we're talking about making Kiswahili a common language?
I will say to you, what we should do again is the power of the music. If you recall me, the cultural emissary and ambassador of Africa, Mama Mira Makeba, he already reminded us when he was singing in Swahili, Hapo Zamani, he was showing us the language that even as Swahili speaker, you can be a polyglot. You can use different languages but using Swahili. Because what we have found ourselves thinking in our own languages before we can speak the former colonial master's language. Now, you have Akalan, which is an African language academy that is based in Bamako.
Advocate, it does seem that we've lost audio on your end. Let's see if we can't establish connection again. We can hear you loud and clear. Please continue with your line of thought. Yes.
Yes, I was saying that in Mali, Bamako, we have the African Language Academy. That African Language Academy, they were recently in Khalishewi, in the University of Solomon Black. I think if we should have followed them, they have even pushed UNESCO to say, come 7 July will be a World Day of promoting Kiswahili language. I still recall at UNISA, there was one professor from Senegal, Ambassador Samba. He used to push us to say, even in the African Renaissance journey, in the Ubuntu journey, we need to focus on our languages. How do we make our languages to be harmonized and our languages to bring unity, to bring development? So I'm not critiquing to say we can push Swahili just for now, but it has been a long-standing issue. Because I've said earlier, it's almost 16 years. It should be implemented by member states. South Africa has already taken a lead, Botswana, Namibia, but I still lament with the media that the media content and the context of covering Africa, it must at least try to include Kiswahili language, because it's a language that is very rich. It's a language that is rich with our proverbs. It's a language that is bringing the unity. Hence, I use the case study of Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. in the early 60s until today, that even when they are in parliament, they speak in Kiswahili. Our president, remember, when he started in 2018, he was a polyglot. He could master all languages, but he's now caught up in the English lingua franca.
All right, well, Advocate Sipho Mantula, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights on that. We were in conversation there with Africa analyst, Advocate Sipho Mantula, talking to us there about the significance of the African Union's decision to utilize Swahili as a working language, to adopt it officially as a language of business.